Good afternoon. Welcome to the session of Disaster Risk Reduction Governance. We would like to start inviting the chairs and co-chairs of this session. Hi, Excellency, Mr. Anura Priyadarsana Yapa, Minister of Disaster Management of Sri Lanka. Please, to the podium. To the co-chair, Mr. Robert Sakic Troglik, PhD student of the Heriot-Watt University of Edinburgh, leading the Children and Youth Group. We invite the panelists, Mr. Carlos Ivan Marquez Perez, Director of the National Unit for Disaster Risk Management in Colombia. We invite Her Excellency Maria Luisa Romero, Minister of Government of Panama. We would like to invite Mr. Fadi Hamdan, Managing Director of the Disaster Risk Management Center in Lebanon. Mrs. Dilanthia Maratunga, Chair of the DRR Governance Words into Action Working Group. Welcome. And Mrs. Natalia Leyva, Executive Assistant to the Secretary General of Asia Pacific Broadcasting Union.
I think we know the switch, no?
We'd like to welcome the panel with a round of applause.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
First, before inviting the chairs and co-chairs for leading the session, I would like to introduce both colleagues, Mr. Minister of Disaster Management, Her Excellency Anura Priyadarsana Yapa, Minister of Disaster Management of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka. Honorary Mr. Yapa is a Vice President of Sri Lanka Freedom Party. She is the chief partner of the national government formed after the parliamentary election held on 17th of August 2015. He was the General Secretary of the SLFP from September 2014 to August 2015. Honorary Anura Priyadarsana was sworn as the Minister of Disaster Management on 4 September 2015 of the present government led by Her Excellency the President Maithripala Sirisena. He was elected Member of Parliament in 1994, and he has held several cabinet portfolios since then, including the Minister of Environment, Minister of Mass Media and Information, Minister of Enterprise Development and Investment Promotion, Minister of Plantation Industries, and Minister of Petroleum Industries. I would like to also introduce our other chair of the session, Mr. Robert Sakic Troglik, who leads the United Nations Major Group for Children and Youth. Robert Sakic is a Hydro Nation Scholar of the Scottish Government and PhD student at the Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh. He is investigating the role of local knowledge in community-based disaster risk reduction in Malawi. Robert holds a Master in Engineering in Civil Engineering from the University of Split in Croatia and a Master in Science in Flood Risk Management from the UNESCO IHE Institute for Water Education in the Netherlands. He is a focal point for the Youth Scientist Platform on Disaster Risk Reduction of the United Nations Major Group for Children and Youth and Disaster Risk Reduction, and coordinator of the team within the Water Youth Network. Please welcome the panel for being here and providing their views on this session. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now call the meeting to order. And before I introduce the panelists, may I be permitted to make my introductory remarks? My dear panelists, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to have this opportunity to chair this important working session on disaster risk reduction, governance, together with Mr. Robert Troglik from Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh. And I would like to invite all of you to engage in a dialogue, sharing your best practices on how disaster risk reduction governance work at different levels in your countries and which has not yet yielded expected results. More so, the approach adopted in maintaining accountability. Since this is the first ever opportunity we are having as a global platform, following the successful adaptation of 2015 Sendai Framework on DRR, I think it is also a mandate to look back and take stock on how far we have realized the set priorities and have adopted the global targets at national and subnational levels. In particular, since this working session focuses on priority 2 of the Sendai Framework, which is strengthening disaster risk governance to manage disaster risk reduction, the time is opportune for us to assess this as sustainability of our own national and local DDR strategies and challenges we have encountered in the implementation. We all agree that the 4 priorities of the Sendai Framework are interlinked. However, you would agree with me that it is not an exaggeration to state that strengthening governance to manage disaster risk is the silver thread that runs through connecting and building a strong, coherent, sustainable DRR policy of a country. And I hope that the panelists will enlighten you more. And now I will ask the co-chair to give his opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, heads of delegations, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. The second priority area for action of the Sendai Framework highlights the key role of holistic, decisive, and human right-based action through transparent, democratic, inclusive, and collective processes. Since disasters and their impacts are largely shaped by social, economic, environmental, political, and cultural contexts, then governance is the umbrella under which disaster risk reduction must take place. Good disaster governance has the potential to create strong baseline to facilitate the implementation, follow-up, and review of the 4 priority areas, while strengthening capabilities and building capacities of all stakeholder groups and individuals. However, poor governance continues to be one of the key unresolved issues, both in the construction of risk and slow reduction of disaster risks. Speaking on behalf of the United Nations Major Group for Children and Youth, the formal engagement mechanism for a critical segment of society for implementing the framework, allow me to share our perspectives on inclusive, people-centered, and evidence-informed disaster risk governance. The narratives of the importance of the youth engagement are well exercised in the global political arenas, whilst realities from the ground send a clear message that there are many challenges inhibiting full, meaningful, and institutionalized youth participation. We hold a strong position on the necessity for meaningfully including all segments of society, including young people and marginalized groups, in an effort to leave no one behind in disaster risk governance at all levels. Whilst our inclusion as young people is exemplified by our continued engagement from Sendai to Cancun, the biggest challenge facing us and many other demographic right holder groups is to ensure that the opportunities for engagement are readily accessible to the people actively working towards risk reduction in their communities and those affected by disasters. The 2016 Youth Development Index reports indicates all-round development of young people in most parts of the world. Despite this progress, the lowest level of youth development are found in areas most prone and vulnerable to disasters, and these are the same areas that have some of the highest proportion of youth in their demographics. Evidence shows that participatory practices facilitate more effective governance processes and create more accountable governance structures. The backbone of right holder groups' participation in governance can be looked at through the lenses of civic participation and political inclusion. Furthermore, the power of science and technology can be leveraged to inform appropriate formation and use of governance mechanisms. The shift in political commitment from response to preparedness must be operationalized through effective and fit-for-purpose DRR governance. It must be coupled with a shift in culture, resource allocation, priorities, and action. Engaging all sectors of society becomes even more critical as the success of preparedness is directly conditioned by buy-in by everyone at all levels. This is especially true for youth, as we will be the one implementing and held accountable for future DRR policies and programs. DRR governance must enable inclusion and mobilization of all segments of society at local levels and full participation in multi-stakeholder processes at national levels, including the national platforms. Today, we look forward to an engaging dialogue and hearing contributions on best practices of and examples on good governance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My next duty is to introduce the panelists, and I will start from my left. Mr. Carlos Ivan Marquez Perez, Director General, National Unit for Disaster Risk Management, Colombia. Mr. Marquez is a business administrator with postgraduate studies in financial management, with more than 20 years of experience in humanitarian assistance and disaster risk management from directive positions, with a wide experience in the academic field. Mr. Marquez was part of the international movement of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies as General Relief Director of the National Society of the Colombian Red Cross, and has been part of numerous international relief operations. In his current position as General Director of the National Unit for Disaster Risk Management, he has led the adoption and implementation of the national policy of disaster risk management in the country, and for 5 years has coordinated the risk knowledge, risk reduction, and disaster management actions of the National System for Disaster Risk Management in Colombia. Mr. Marquez was the chair of INSAG Americas Regional Group in 2016. Now my right, Maria Lucia Romero, the minister from the government of Colombia. The lawyer graduated from the Faculty of Law from Harvard University and a degree in political science from the same university in 2004. She won both times with the degree of cum laude and magna cum laude respectively. He has served as a member of the International Clinic of Human Rights of Harvard University 2006 to 2008, consultant to the International Clinic of Human Rights and Conflict Resolution of Stanford University 2013, consultant of the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights 2014, litigation lawyer, consultant to the President of the Senate of the Puerto Rico, and civil society organizations on issues related to protection of human rights. On December 10, 2013, the Network of Organizations for Human Rights in Panama awarded a recognition for her work in defense of the rights of persons deprived of liberty in the country. As of July 1, 2014, she was appointed Deputy Minister of Government, and from January 12 to 2017, appointed as the Minister of Government of the President of the Republic of Panama, Juan Carlos Varela. As a result of portfolio, the supervision of the prison system, the national system of civil protection, and directorate in the charge of indigenous affairs. From my extreme left is Mr. Fadi Hamdan, organization represented Disaster Risk Management Center. Fadi works in cities, ministries, and governments to develop local, sectoral, and national strategies for risk management that include the prevention of new risk, the reduction of existing risk, and building resilience against residual risks. Fadi also helps cities, ministries, and countries in collecting and analyzing disaster losses due to both intense and extensive risks in order to be able to fully comprehend disaster risk and how it is influenced by and also affects development initiatives by the public sector, investment by the public sector, and climate change. He is particularly interested in examining how different governance systems at national and local level either lead to the creation and accumulation of risk or to the successful implementation of risk reduction strategies. More recently, is working on the assessment of incentives for financing sustainable development and climate change adaptation and how DRR financing can be integrated with these. He works in Africa, the Middle East, and Europe, is a regular author of conference and journal papers on DRM and a contributor to blogs related to DRM both in Europe and USA. The next speaker from my right, after the Minister, is Professor Dilanthi Amaratunga. Dilanthi Amaratunga is a professor of disaster risk management at the University of Huddersfield, UK. She is leading expert in disaster resilience with an international reputation. She is the editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Disaster Resilience in the Built Environment, a key journal to promote research and scholarly activity that examines the role of building and construction to anticipate and respond to unexpected events that damage or destroy the built environment. She led the international peer review panel of the UN Global Assessment Report input papers in 2015. Dilanthi also has led and chaired a large number of international conferences, demonstrating her role as a leader and as a conduit for international collaboration and engagement. To date, Dilanthi has published over 250 peer-reviewed articles and delivered over 60 invited presentations around the world. She is regularly invited to provide expert advice on disaster resilience by national and local governments and international agencies. She is also a UNISDR Making Cities Resilient and one of the two formally appointed advocates, campaign advocates. She has also been appointed by the UNISDR as the working group leader of the Words into Action on Accountability and Governance. The last speaker, Natalia Leyva, Head of Secretary General's Office, Asia Pacific Broadcasting Union. Natalia is responsible for strategic development, members, external relations, and marketing. She began her career in Bulgarian national television and more than 20 years of successful media career in radio and television, including 10 years in the BBC World Service in London. Natalia holds an MBA from the University of Ottawa, Canada, and University of Kent, UK. Since she joined the ABU in 2010, Natalia had spearheaded the Media Stakeholder Group for Disaster Risk Reduction. Natalia also initiated the ABU Radio and TV Awards for Climate Change and Disaster Management coverage to encourage more production on the biggest channel facing the mankind. Now it is time to hear what the panelists will. Then I will hand over mic to the co-chair to invite.
So, Minister Carlos Ivan Marquez Perez, please.
Bueno, buenas tardes para todos. Quiero, en primer lugar, agradecer el espacio que nos brindan como país, como Colombia, en este foro para compartir con ustedes unos temas que han sido de gran importancia para el crecimiento en la gestión de riesgo de desastres en el país. Primero que todo, abordar el tema de gobernanza y política pública requiere de unos análisis precisos. Primero debe haber voluntad política. Y la voluntad política inicia desde la cabeza de cualquier Estado, en este caso en Colombia del Presidente de la República. Esa foto que ven al frente, la persona que va en el centro es el Presidente de la República, quien ha generado desde hace 5 años lo que es la adopción de una política nacional de gestión de riesgo a través de una ley. Pero tenemos que mirar algunos aspectos importantes. La retrospectiva como una base de no olvidar lo que ha ocurrido en la historia de los países, pero también revisar el tema de presente y futuro. Y cuando hablamos de presente y futuro, hay unos marcos que nos rigen. Sendai nos marca unos objetivos hasta el 2030. Y eso lo que tenemos que mirar como país es fundamentalmente el hacernos la pregunta, pero también tomando la decisión, cómo garantizar la aplicación del marco en lo que se refiere al desarrollo de mecanismos de gobernanza de riesgo y que tengan un carácter multisectorial y con participación de múltiples actores. En ese sentido, nosotros entendemos que ese marco nos tiene que llevar a unos análisis de manera regional, pero también de manera local. Sendai nos da unas líneas hasta el 2030, pero en cada uno de las regiones, como en el caso nuestro, que es el que queremos compartir, existe un marco desde el punto de vista de normas jurídicas y un marco que tiene que estar relacionado con la planeación, con la planificación. La norma jurídica es importante, aunque hay algunos acuerdos a nivel internacional que son vinculantes y otros no vinculantes. Sendai es no vinculante, pero hay que llevarlo a la política pública de las regiones. En el caso nuestro, se adopta una política nacional mediante una ley. Colombia tiene la ley de la gestión de riesgo que se enfoca y que adopta de manera ordenada el marco de acción de Sendai y los otros lineamientos a nivel internacional como el marco del desarrollo y los acuerdos que se han tenido con la adaptación al cambio climático, o la COP21. Esto también, desde el punto de vista legal o de la norma, se complementa, en el caso nuestro, con actores que tienen que ver en la gestión de riesgo. La ley de los bomberos para identificar capacidades de respuesta, la ley de los voluntariados y algo importante en nuestro país es la ley de vivienda o la ley de uso de terrenos o de suelos. La vulnerabilidad de cada región se enmarca por situaciones que ponen en riesgo y el mal uso del suelo es uno de los puntos que han generado impacto muy fuerte. La norma jurídica tiene que desarrollarse bajo unos escenarios de planificación. Por eso, la coherencia con el plan de desarrollo es importante de cada país. Nuestro plan de desarrollo tiene unos enfoques importantes en el tema que marca la ley 1523, que es la gestión de riesgo, pero también en el desarrollo del país, un país que está saliendo adelante con varias situaciones difíciles del pasado, pero que en el presente ya lo estamos desarrollando, incluyendo situaciones como la paz. Nuestro planeamiento en cuanto a la gestión de riesgo está marcado en un plan que la ley nos lo exige, y Colombia tiene un plan para cumplirla en el periodo de 2015 al 2025. Y esos objetivos y esas metas tienen indicadores de resultados que se pueden cuantificar, pero que también se pueden cualificar y se evalúan no únicamente por un sistema, sino por todo un Estado como tal. Y en ese sentido se empieza a bajar el mecanismo de la política pública desde la parte nacional, regional y local. Y esto hay que volverlo realidad. Esto tenemos que pasar de la teoría a la práctica. Hay que volverlo participativo y un ejemplo del tema participativo es cómo hemos construido a nivel de país lo que es el Plan Nacional de Gestión de Riesgo. Si me lo permiten, en unos segundos quisiera que le dé clic la persona que me pueda ayudar para mostrarles cómo hemos hecho nosotros en el país en el tema de la planificación o el plan de gestión de riesgo. ¿Se puede? Ya, ¿no? El videoclip. Es un vínculo que está en la presentación que quería mostrarles como una buena práctica que hemos hecho a nivel de...
Los colombianos en desarrollo de la Política Nacional de Gestión del Riesgo tenemos un plan, el Plan Nacional para la Gestión del Riesgo de Desastres, y por primera vez junto a todas las entidades del Estado estamos trabajando para afrontar el riesgo, gracias a la participación de 320 representantes de entidades públicas del orden nacional, departamental y municipal, junto al compromiso del sector privado y comunitario. Con este plan promovemos la gestión del riesgo y el desarrollo territorial hasta el 2025. Nuestro objetivo es construir una Colombia menos vulnerable y comunidades más resilientes. Es imposible asegurar dónde o cuándo puede ocurrir una emergencia, pero con este plan nos preparamos para conocer nuestro territorio, adaptarnos al cambio climático, reducir las condiciones de riesgo, dar respuesta a las emergencias y ser capaces de recuperarnos ante cualquier eventualidad. Para seguir creciendo como país, reducir el riesgo es nuestra mejor opción. Unidad Nacional para la Gestión del Riesgo de Desastres.
Muy bien. En ese sentido, hay una fase que es la implementación. Y la implementación se regula en 3 líneas fundamentales. Conocimiento del riesgo, que se está abordando en la región y en gran parte del mundo, desde la gestión integral como parte fundamental, la reducción del riesgo como las obras de mitigación y demás, y el manejo de desastres. Esto quiere decir que en el caso nuestro, de Colombia, la implementación de la política, que hay que medirla, las políticas hay que colocarles indicadores de medición. Nosotros hemos abordado un reto importante que es hacer que Colombia sea un país menos vulnerable y con comunidades más resilientes. Y para que sea menos vulnerable, en los últimos 5 años hemos hecho inversiones de $2.000 millones en obras de mitigación. Se han trabajado en todos los municipios del país. Hemos sacado de 45 millones de habitantes que tiene Colombia, un gran número de personas que estaban en zonas de riesgo. 7.4 millones de personas están en zonas seguras. Anteriormente eran las recurrentes. Y se han trabajado en protocolos de actuación y en guías de análisis de la vulnerabilidad y demás. Un dato que hemos estado revisando: antes invertíamos más en atención de las emergencias. Aquí podemos comprobar que nosotros estamos invirtiendo el 68% del presupuesto en conocimiento y en reducción del riesgo en los últimos 5 años. Y el 32% se ha incluido en el tema de atención, lo que hace verificar que para el tema nuestro, la política pública, las estrategias de planificación, los indicadores de resultados y la inversión real son los que hacen que el tema de la gestión de riesgo se pueda notar de manera integral, y en eso está apuntando Colombia para aportar esquemas para el desarrollo como tal. Con esto termino, con el mensaje final. Colombia le apunta a tener países menos vulnerables, con comunidades más resilientes y la contribución inclusive a la paz. Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you very much. Now I will invite Ms. Maria Lucia Romero, but for all panelists I must emphasize that we have only 25 minutes for everyone. Then please mindful about the time. Thank you.
Muchas gracias y muy buenas tardes a todos. El riesgo de desastres tiene un efecto en cascada entre sectores que en muchas ocasiones repercute en los medios de vida y el bienestar económico de las personas, aumentando la pobreza y la inseguridad. La reducción del riesgo de desastres es un componente esencial del desarrollo sostenible. Por lo tanto, los países no solo deben abordar el riesgo de manera aislada, sino hacerlo en concordancia con los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible, para así integrarlo a los planes sectoriales de desarrollo del país. La República de Panamá, desde el 2005, ha encaminado sus esfuerzos en establecer una política de gestión integral de riesgos de desastres que incorpore a las poblaciones más vulnerables, así como a los diferentes actores del desarrollo. En este sentido, hemos fortalecido la inclusión de los gobiernos locales como parte del proceso de descentralización de los municipios que inició por ley en nuestro país en el año 2015. Por otro lado, incorporamos la gestión integral de riesgos de desastres en los procesos de desarrollo del país, incidiendo en los aspectos económicos y financieros, políticas de ordenamiento territorial, desarrollo municipal y comunitario, desarrollo de los pueblos indígenas, inclusión de personas con discapacidad, el establecimiento de alianzas público-privadas y promoviendo una política de gestión correctiva y prospectiva del riesgo de desastres, así como también el fortalecimiento de las estructuras operativas en preparación para la atención y respuesta a emergencias y desastres. Durante la administración del excelentísimo señor presidente de la República de Panamá, Juan Carlos Varela Rodríguez, se le ha dado una gran relevancia a la gobernabilidad para la reducción de riesgos de desastres, promoviendo la Política Nacional de Gestión Integral de Riesgo como eje en el cual se orientan las acciones y decisiones políticas desde una perspectiva integral de reducción al riesgo de desastres. Esta política se dinamiza y se pone en práctica a través de la Plataforma Nacional de Gestión Integrada de Riesgos de Desastres de la República de Panamá, que preside el Ministerio de Gobierno y coordina el Sistema Nacional de Protección Civil, con las 45 instituciones que componen dicha plataforma. Es por ello que Panamá estableció entre sus prioridades la conformación de las plataformas provinciales de gestión integrada de riesgos y su descentralización en las plataformas municipales como parte del proceso de gobernanza de gestión de riesgo a escala regional, comunitaria y local, respectivamente. Todo lo anterior en el marco de un proceso nacional de fortalecimiento de los procesos de prevención de riesgo de desastres con la intención de instrumentalizar los acuerdos de Sendai. En este contexto, consideramos oportuno referirnos a la creación del Hub Humanitario para la región, el cual operará en Panamá a partir de abril 2018, que si bien constituye una iniciativa de alcance nacional y regional, representa un esfuerzo sin precedentes en el marco de implementación de estrategias que permitan mayor y mejor respuesta frente a desastres, ya sea en el ámbito local, nacional y regional. El Centro Logístico Regional de Asistencia Humanitaria en Panamá consiste en una plataforma logística de gestión y facilitación de las actividades de asistencia humanitaria que realizarán los países asistentes por medio de organizaciones internacionales. Será el centro de recepción, manejo y despacho de toda la ayuda humanitaria, contando con recursos humanos, equipo y suministros desde los países donantes hacia las zonas de desastres. Tenemos un 56% de avance en la construcción y estamos trabajando ahora mismo en formar las alianzas estratégicas con los países tanto donantes como los que pueden recibir la asistencia humanitaria. Finalmente, quisiera señalar que garantizar la incorporación de nuevos actores, gobiernos locales, empresa privada y comunidad organizada en el marco del desarrollo sostenible es lo que permitirá que las acciones de gestión de reducción de riesgos se fortalezcan y formen parte del desarrollo de nuestras comunidades hacia el logro de un país resiliente para la reducción de riesgos de desastres. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Minister, for your thought-provoking presentation. And now I will invite Mr. Fadi Hamdan to make his presentation.
Thank you. Before starting, I want to thank the government and people of Mexico for hosting this conference. Our topic today is really a challenging one. How can we ensure that the governance requirements in Sendai will be implemented, and how can we ensure that governments and countries will really develop local and national cross-sectoral platforms? It's difficult, at least in the countries that I have experience in, which tend to be from low to high income, but with relatively weak capacities, with relatively weak to medium risk governance practices, and with various degrees of inequality indicators. In these countries, usually, when there are cross-sectoral platforms, they were developed historically to act as DM or disaster management platforms, and now some are expecting them to act as disaster risk management platforms, which, as you can imagine, is very challenging, and to expect that these same platforms can act as forums for debate and to discuss cross-sectoral priorities and so on. We all, I think, agree here that we want to move from DM to DRM, and we want to move from DM platforms to DRM platforms, but the question is, what are the tangible steps that we can take to try to contribute to this process? And I want, in the few minutes given to me, to try to suggest some of these steps in an effort to contribute to the discussion. I believe a first step is to adopt a much broader understanding of risk governance, not only to look at risk governance as the mandates and the capacities, but look at risk governance as the set of decisions that is related to reducing, preventing, and managing the risks that may arise due to the use of various resources, and how these decisions then result in a particular distribution of exposure, vulnerability, risk, and losses across sectors, communities, and households, and how we can ensure that these decisions are inclusive, are collective, and are transparent. We also need to improve our understanding of the impact related to these risk governance decisions and how these decisions impact the success or not of disaster risk management efforts, and then use this understanding to empower those suffering the disproportionate effects of disaster risk and losses so that they can lobby themselves and advocate for the use of further enhanced risk governance practices. And to try to move a bit from the abstract to something more tangible, what do we mean by these decisions? Okay, so for example, let's pick a few. There is first the issue of when do we decide and who decides whether we're going to look at extensive risk, which usually affects poorer communities in rural and urban areas, or whether we're only going to focus on intensive risk. How is this decision made, and for what, in what mechanism? Who decides whether we're going to assess the risk and the losses in a disaggregated manner, which would then allow us to link to the challenges in development, including related to poverty and inequality and so on, or if we're not going to look at these risk and loss parameters in a disaggregated manner? And how is this decision made? Who decides and how is the decision made whether we're going to look only at preventing new risk for new infrastructure in wealthier areas, or whether we're also going to look at reducing existing infrastructure? Who decides and how it's decided that when we're assessing risk, for example, we should only look at the physical and natural factors that contribute to risk and vulnerability, or whether we should look at the whole set of social, economic, institutional factors in addition to the natural and physical factors that contribute to vulnerability, and see how these in turn interact with the main disaster risk drivers, particularly those for extensive risk, namely poverty, unchecked urban expansion, environmental degradation, and weak governance and weak risk governance. And if we do this set of decision-making process in an inclusive manner, in a collective manner, and in a transparent manner, or if we at least highlight the importance of doing it in such a manner, then in my view, we have a higher chance that the recommendations related to risk governance in Sendai and the recommendations for the development of local and national platforms for disaster risk management, then these are more likely to be adopted and implemented and used. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I now invite Professor Dilanti Amaratunga for her remarks, please. Slides.
For the slides, the control.
Control, right.
Thank you very much, Chair. Over the 5 minutes that I have been allocated, I will briefly talk about accountability as an entry point to disaster risk governance. There is actually a clear definition of disaster risk governance provided in the review of 2009 UNICR terminology on disaster risk reduction that was done in December 2016, developed by an open-ended intergovernmental expert working group. Good governance in general is referred to the process of making and implementing decisions by governments and other public or public corporate entities. There are several important characteristics of good governance. They include participation, consensus, accountability, transparency, responsiveness, effectiveness, efficiency, equity, inclusivity, and the rule of law. The scope of the disaster risk governance has expanded in terms of ideas, stakeholders, and modalities. This has made an integrated and coordinated approach an imperative in the disaster risk governance process. This is also what is important to recognize, that the outcome of disaster risk governance depends to a large degree on the extent to which various stakeholders can be held accountable for their actions and inactions. As outlined in the Sendai Framework, the accountability of multiple layers of stakeholders has become a critical factor in the achievement of the 7 global targets and the reduction of disaster risk as an expected outcome of the framework. These stakeholders include not only different tiers of government, ranging from national through subnational to local, but also civil society, academia, scientific and research entities, business, professional associations, and the media. Accountability in this context is a way of ensuring adherence to a set of common principles, values, and objectives. If those in positions of power and authority take responsibility for their actions and inactions, and certain ambiguous sanctions follow in the case of neglect of responsibility, it is easier to ensure responsible decision making. So what are the key enablers of accountability? We have identified 9 key enablers here. I will try my best to sort of take you through very briefly in these categories. Broadly defined, given the increasing significance of DRR today, accountability needs to be defined in broader rather than narrower terms in order to ensure that state and non-state actors live up to public expectations with regard to vulnerability reduction and preparedness improvement at all stages of disaster management. This means not just financial accountability, but wider legal and social responsibility. The second enabler that we have identified is responsibility. It is important to identify the institutions and authorities that can be held accountable. This also needs to be carefully examined in order to apportion responsibility, both legally and morally, for various aspects of DRR. This includes establishing a clear understanding of the state's legal and moral obligations and capacity to develop all components of disaster frameworks. Then the next enabler is stakeholders. Accountability for disaster risk governance is an obligation on the part of many stakeholders from national government downwards. And there have been a lot of discussions about who all these stakeholders are during this symposium. And the next enabler that we have identified is collaboration. Given the diversity of potential actors and institutions involved in disaster risk governance, accountability is often a joint responsibility. Then it is penalties and incentives. The lack of accountability on the part of governments, state institutions, and public officials, as well as diverse private sector stakeholders, tends to magnify the material and human cost of disasters. While it is necessary to find effective ways to ensure accountability, there may include both penalties as well as incentives. We shouldn't forget. And the next enabler is regulatory bodies. The role of regulatory bodies, in particular those relating to resources, human settlement, construction, and social and physical infrastructure is critically important to ensure accountability on the part of many stakeholders, such as land developers, industrialists, construction firms, and state institutions. And the next enabler is external factors. While large-scale disasters usually draw responses from institutions across a wider field, most of them naturally withdraw from the disaster zone over time, leaving behind newly built settlements, vital infrastructure, and other arrangements, but also their responsibilities, which is extremely important. And then, of course, we have the broader participation. It is important to identify the characteristics of community and characteristics of the enabling environment, including how to encourage broad-based participation, strengthening the political involvement of citizens in decision-making processes, and in mechanisms for legitimacy and control. And finally, it is monitoring. Monitoring processes are critically important. This includes the need to provide a basket of indicators, providing a clarity on the nuts and bolts of monitoring, focusing on data management, improving systems to track and gauge disaster risk, and ensuring an alignment with the monitoring systems of the Sendai Framework. What I have done during my 5 minutes is to give you a very brief overview of some of the key enablers for accountability. These and other issues on accountability as an entry point for disaster risk governance are addressed in a UN Words into Action guide that is now out for consultations. This guide is a product of discussions and contributions from diverse stakeholders, as well as UNISDR nominated experts appointed specifically for the development of the Words into Action guidelines. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you very much. Now I will invite the last panelist, Ms. Natalia Oliva, to make a statement, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon to everyone that has the patience and the energy to be still here listening to us. Muchas gracias, Mexico, for the wonderful arrangements and great hospitality. It is my honor to represent the media stakeholder group at this session. Our group is really young, but I dare to say it is very powerful. It is supported by broadcasting unions, newspapers, and journalists networks in Asia Pacific, Africa, Europe, Arab countries, and North America. We are extremely grateful to UNISDR for encouraging and supporting us and for giving us a chance to speak at this session. We consider this as a sign of changing attitude in UN agencies towards the media's role in disaster risk reduction. The media stakeholder group was established in Sendai after realization that the media doesn't do enough to serve its audiences with regards to covering climate change and disaster risk management. The general public, the ordinary citizens, are not aware, not well informed about these global challenges and the efforts of governments to overcome them. The governments and international agencies, of course, expect media to cover DRR-related stories. That happens indeed, but the coverage is usually confined to disaster coverage, rescue and relief operations. Everyone is competing to get the story first, but shortly after that, the media interest is gone. There are rarely stories about recovery and rebuilding. Media goes to a sleeping mode until the next disaster. In the quiet times between disasters, media is not interested in DRR because they don't see the human interest stories, the stories that will sell newspapers or attract audiences. Another role that media has at the moment is a role given by the governments, and this is to disseminate early warnings. Almost everywhere in the world, the warning issuing authorities are linked to media organizations, especially radio and television, to use their network for disaster communications. That is really life-saving role. However, the role of media as a powerful and cost-effective educator and behavioral change agent is not utilized. Also not utilized is the most crucial role of media in democratic societies, to monitor the actions and activities of the government and other institutions, including those responsible for risk management, to ensure accountability and transparency of the DRR plans and their implementation. This is probably the most important role that media have for DRR governance, to empower people with knowledge by raising awareness about the commitments governments have taken in Sendai or Paris or New York, to get out stories how the implementation is going. Is it efficient? Is there corruption? Does it benefit the people? Are there adequate laws to facilitate DRR? Are there adequate building standards? Are they properly put into practice? The list of possible stories of public interest is really endless. There is something else media could do very successfully. Media can link all stakeholders in the DRR process: government agencies, parliamentarians, local authorities, NGOs representing women, children, persons with disabilities, indigenous group, migrant, the science and academia, the private sector. The reason for media existence is to serve readers, listeners, viewers, and increasingly social media users, to voice stories relevant to their lives. Media is indeed the common denominator for the activities of all stakeholders, because media encompass and aim to reflect all aspects of life. This is what media can and should do. The big question is why media hadn't assumed this role to bring DRR awareness, transparency, and accountability, and break the silos in which the stakeholders work. There are three main reasons. The DRR is a government-led process, and often the relations between governments and media are not what they should be in this case. In some countries, the media is the government mouthpiece. In others, there is a deep-seated mistrust and misunderstanding. Another reason is that the media is often ignorant or indifferent to the impacts of climate change and the DRR efforts. Media practitioners are reluctant to cover these issues because they are too complex, require a lot of knowledge and considerable production skills to bring these complex issues to a personal level as stories that sell newspapers and attract audiences. There is a problem in the media itself. By its very nature, the media is a reactive beast. Our challenge is to make it proactive, to keep the DRR stories alive in the quiet times between disasters. It is not difficult, it's just a matter of building the capacity of media houses to produce quality programs in all genres and formats. In other words, to mainstream disaster risk reduction in media output. I can assure you this is not difficult, and there is will in many organizations to change the reactive mindset, but they need support and resources. So there are two messages the media stakeholder group wants to put across to governments and international donors. Please recognize media as a partner and involve them in DRR planning and implementation. Provide resources to train the messenger. This is not a cost, this is an investment that will bring quick returns in terms of DRR literacy among the general public and building knowledgeable communities able to understand risk and how to minimize it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now we come to the next session. My co-chair will pose a question to each panelist, and he will moderate the next discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. So the first question will be for Minister Perez from Colombia. From your perspective as a national institution leading the DRR efforts in Colombia, what are the challenges for good governance in disaster risk, and how can local and national DRR strategies contribute in overcoming these challenges? In the light of the recent events in Colombia, how do you assess local government roles in governance accountability for disaster risk reduction?
Bueno, muchas gracias. Es una pregunta muy importante porque nos deja un escenario para evaluar qué estamos haciendo. Para los últimos acontecimientos que hemos tenido en Colombia, es importante responder lo siguiente. La política se formuló a través de una ley que ya tiene 5 años. En esos escenarios, Colombia ha tenido que revisar si se han adoptado mecanismos locales y departamentales. Hoy en día se puede decir que el país tiene 32 regiones, 32 departamentos, y en los 32 departamentos de Colombia se tiene creado el Fondo de Gestión de Riesgo y las oficinas de gestión de riesgo de desastres. En el tema de la vulnerabilidad también la hemos revisado, y la vulnerabilidad del país frente a las situaciones de amenaza, que son muy grandes, hemos reducido, como lo dije en la presentación anterior, en el tema de la atención, y hemos incrementado los recursos en el tema de la reducción y conocimiento del riesgo. Además de eso, Colombia ha atravesado en estos últimos 3 años por 2 grandes eventos que han requerido de una planificación y una respuesta. La reconstrucción de un municipio que fue afectado hace 2 años y hoy en día se culminó con el proceso completo de un plan de acción específico, quiere decir que cumplió. Y de hecho hemos tenido que enfrentar situaciones adicionales como el de la frontera con Venezuela. Hace 2 años 22.000 colombianos fueron sacados de ese país y el sistema fue capaz de reaccionar de manera efectiva, rápida, y entramos a la estabilización. En cuanto a los retos, hay varios retos. Uno es seguir trabajando en la gestión de riesgo como un proceso asociado a las políticas de desarrollo sostenible. Segundo, es quitar de la mente de los gobernantes locales algo que quiero resaltar acá en este escenario: el endoso de las responsabilidades, porque por más que haya política no se puede endosar las responsabilidades locales a los gobiernos centrales. Debemos también respetar las capacidades locales, pero por supuesto con la suma de la capacidad nacional. Sendai nos marca y nos traza una línea clara al respecto. La responsabilidad es compartida, es un reto importantísimo. Y termino también con un reto importante que es algo que involucra a todos los países: la cooperación y el acompañamiento internacional. Debe comprender que los países como Colombia y muchos otros en el mundo tienen capacidades propias y se debe ayudar sin hacer daño. Esos son retos que tenemos que seguir insistiendo. Lo he escuchado desde que he estado trabajando en el tema de la gestión de riesgo, pero cada vez que hay una situación en un país, por más que se tengan capacidades, la cooperación muchas veces llega sin necesidad. Y alguien decía en algún escenario: ningún país está obligado a recibir lo que no ha pedido, y eso es un llamado que hacemos a nivel del respeto de las capacidades locales.
Thank you very much, Minister Perez. The next question is for Minister from Panama, Minister Romero. Which do you consider are the challenges faced to advance risk governance at the local and community levels? And what is needed in order to ensure governance approaches are gender sensitive and inclusive? Which do you think, from the experience of national risk reduction platforms, should be the participation of civil society in the construction of governance?
Muchas gracias por la pregunta. Como mencioné en mi presentación, en Panamá nos hemos dado a la tarea de incluir a los gobiernos locales en todo el tema de reducción de riesgo de desastres. Hemos trabajado fuertemente con nuestro Sistema Nacional de Protección Civil para poder capacitar a los municipios, para lograr que el proceso de descentralización que se está llevando a cabo a nivel nacional para temas de inversiones públicas, también llegue al tema de prevención y de reducción de riesgo. Tenemos un reto definitivamente ahí, que es involucrar mayormente a todos los municipios y otras autoridades locales, pero es algo en lo que estamos trabajando fuertemente en temas de sensibilización y de capacitación por parte de nuestro Sistema Nacional de Protección Civil. Yo creo que un tema importante que debo mencionar es que nosotros en esta administración hemos hecho algo innovador para nuestro país, porque anteriormente se trabajaba de manera muy aislada entre las diferentes instituciones que podían tener un rol en la prevención de desastres y también la respuesta a ello. Aunque el Sistema Nacional de Protección Civil es el responsable de esta tarea, también le toca coordinar a muchas instituciones distintas, como bien también lo mencionaba el colega de Colombia. Y bajo esta administración hemos instalado la Fuerza de Tarea Conjunta, que lo que busca es que el Sistema Nacional de Protección Civil coordine a todas las instituciones que tienen un rol en este trabajo, llámese el Ministerio de Salud, el Ministerio de Educación, las diferentes fuerzas de seguridad. Nos ha ido muy bien, hemos tenido muy buenos resultados, pero definitivamente enfocado más en el tema de respuesta. Y uno de los retos que reconocemos y que estamos trabajando es justamente que esta fuerza de tarea conjunta a nivel interinstitucional pueda trabajar para prevenir, pueda trabajar para reducir riesgos de desastres y para sensibilizar a una población del rol que tiene en este sentido. Y por último, creo que el tema de inclusión y de sociedad civil lo tenemos que ver como reto porque no hemos terminado de lograrlo. Nosotros tenemos avances importantes en el tema de inclusión de personas con discapacidad. Hemos trabajado de manera muy coordinada con el Ministerio de Educación para iniciar estos trabajos a muy tempranas edades, que las personas a todos los niveles entiendan los riesgos y entiendan cómo se tiene que adaptar tanto la prevención como la respuesta para personas con discapacidad. Pero definitivamente nos falta en el tema de incluir un abordaje con perspectiva de género a nivel transversal. Eso es algo que estamos conscientes y algo que estamos trabajando. Y finalmente, en ese sentido, también el tema de la sociedad civil. Creo que al igual que como tal vez se dejaban aisladas a otras instituciones en este trabajo, también se veía mayormente como un tema de gobierno. En esta administración hemos trabajado para incluir, por ejemplo, a la sociedad civil que representa a las personas con discapacidad y nos ha ido muy bien y en este sentido entendemos que tenemos que seguir trabajando. Hemos involucrado a la empresa privada que sepan y entiendan que son parte importante de estos esfuerzos, pero es algo que definitivamente que tenemos que seguir trabajando. Así que yo creo que eso resume de manera muy rápida, porque son muchos los avances, pero también son muchos los retos en este sentido, pero sí creo que tenemos que trabajar mucho en el tema de llevar ese trabajo que nos ha ido muy bien en respuesta a la prevención e incluir el tema de género y a la sociedad civil en este trabajo. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Minister Romero. So my next question would be for Dr. Hamdan. Dr. Hamdan, taking into account a global perspective on the trends of advances and limitations on risk governance, which ones you consider are the main gaps that prevent advancement as suggested by the Sendai Framework? What is necessary to bridge these gaps towards 2030? Finally, how international cooperation within global governance structure could contribute to the implementation of the Sendai Framework?
Thank you. The first challenge is the 5 minute. The first challenge really is agreeing on our diagnosis for the challenge. Challenges in disaster risk management and in risk governance are not occurring in a vacuum. they are superimposed and linked and come on top of other development and climate change related challenges. Whether to borrow from the UNDP Human Development Report for 2016, whether it's the persisting or lingering challenges of deprivation and poverty, whether it's the deepening challenges of inequality, or the emerging challenges of violent extremism. And then on top of that, challenges to do with gender empowerment and equality, and to do with water, food, and energy security or insecurity. So challenges in risk governance are coming on top of all of those, which act as disaster risk drivers and are affected by them. And often in the countries that I've know about and have worked in, these development and climate change challenges are not being addressed because we have, to varying degrees rather, we have what is referred to as a trickle-down economic model for growth, which cannot be inclusive, does not create jobs, and so does not address many of the challenges. And if I may borrow from the economic discipline, from my experience also, a lot of time we have a trickle-down DRR model, which focuses on preventing future risk in new investments and addresses intensive risk in wealthier areas without addressing extensive existing risk in poorer rural and urban areas. And these two, what I call trickle-down economic and DRR models, are interrelated and mutually reinforcing. That is my opinion, and that is the first challenge, is to have a local and national diagnosis of how these two are interacting together to really see to what extent this is an issue and how we can address it. And once we have done that, then ways to address it, in my view, there is no easy way. The international community, as it's always doing, can produce guidance and guidelines and promote best practices, and that's a very good thing. And in doing so, we must not forget that some of the guidance should be targeting, as rightly so, national and local governments, and some of the guidance, as happens, should be targeting other stakeholders, including vulnerable communities, in how they can be more aware and advocate more for addressing these issues. And coming to the last part of the question, which is how can we take advantage of the international stakeholders and best practices, as I said, through the development of best practice guidelines, but also here, if I may add one thing, the best practice or the guidelines, or rather the role of the international stakeholders, part of it is the development and dissemination of guidelines, but part of it is also to make sure that we are also developing guidelines for the international consultancies that are working on disaster risk management, to ensure that when they do so, they not only have the legitimate interests of their shareholders at heart, which is very relevant and legitimate, but also to a certain extent that this is balanced with the interest of the stakeholders in the cities and countries in which they are working to promote best practices. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hamdan. The next question is for Professor Amaratunga. How do you consider the Word into Actions document can support countries in strengthening governance accountability for disaster risk reduction? What is your recommendation for the role of multi-sectoral cooperation in ensuring coherence between Sendai Framework, Sustainable Development Agenda, and Climate Change Agenda?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'll try and cover both aspects. As far as the Words into Action document is concerned, Sendai Framework actually calls for generating evidence-based and practical guidance for implementation in close collaboration with states and through mobilization of experts, reinforcing a culture of engagement and ownership of action by all stakeholders. That is actually the starting point of Words into Action. In that context, the Words into Action are aimed at developing a practical guide that will help countries and partners to move ahead with the implementation of the Sendai Framework. Words into Action, in particular on disaster risk governance and accountability, provides an opportunity to elaborate on some of the very complex and challenging issues of risk governance. With direct reference to Sendai, complete issues relating to disaster risk governance and accountability have been clustered in it to better harness countries' experiences, best practices, and informal networks. Words into Action on disaster risk governance focuses on accountability in the context of disaster risk governance, as I emphasized before. It outlines how accountability could be made an integral part of effective disaster risk governance. And it provides technical and practical guidance for national governments on how accountability can be made an integral part of effective disaster risk governance practices. It also considers a range of definitions and dimensions of accountability, who should be involved and how to create effective accountability with disaster risk governance. It is also complemented by a series of case studies to illustrate accountability in practice, while recommending steps, theories, process building, and tools are described as the basis for operationalizing accountability in diverse institutional settings. The process of development was led by key relevant stakeholders, expert groups, and was transparent and consultative, was drawn from existing guidelines and state-of-the-art practices on how to do DRR, and is very easily actionable, understandable, and accessible by stakeholder, topic, and by the sector. The beneficiaries are those people, organizations, and networks that made up of DRR community within countries, as increased access to key knowledge, information sharing tools, and informed partnerships will aid sustainable capacity building both locally and globally. It is therefore intended that the guide will help countries and partners to move ahead with the implementation of the Sendai Framework by harnessing the state-of-the-art countries' experiences in disaster risk governance and current best practices. If I were to move on to your second question about the role of multi-sectoral cooperation in incorporating the coherence. We have seen interplay between climate change, disaster risk, and poverty. The Sustainable Development Goals call for an end to poverty, a reduction in inequality, and planet that can support future generations. Disaster resilience is fundamental to realizing that agenda. To achieve the Sustainable Development Goals vision for a world free of poverty by 2030, it is important to strengthen the resilience of communities to protect themselves and recover from disasters. Climate change and disaster risk must be addressed as one, as development can only be sustainable when it is risk-informed. Without it, achievements in human development, such as lifting people out of poverty and providing access to quality health and education to everyone, may suddenly be wiped out. The global frameworks recognize that these issues overlap. These frameworks are mutually dependent, with common targets and indicators between them. To achieve these global agendas, every country needs developing its own strategic policies and plans. Coherence between them is essential. In addition to policy coherence, financial is also critical. The economics of resilience cannot be understated. We know that $1 invested in preparedness saves $7 in response. Without big investments across sectors and levels, it will be hard to achieve development that is disaster resilient, sustainable, and inclusive. Better understanding of these economic costs of disasters and climate impacts can drive coherent policies and actions. Shared outcome and interlinkages can be set in the national implementation of the Sendai targets, Sustainable Development Goals, Paris Agreement on Climate Change, and other relevant frameworks. It is therefore necessary to elaborate what governance processes, that is, enhancing consistency of policies, laws and regulations across sectors, strengthening institutional roles, responsibilities and coordination mechanisms, and financing instruments are required to enable synergies and also to identify ways to incorporate targets and indicators into aligned monitoring and reporting systems at national and regional levels. It is also require a strong political direction and vision to drive the legal and institutional setups needed and bring all actors together, including the private sector and the communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Amaratunga. So the last question is for Natalia Leyva, the representative of media. In your view, what is the role of the media, new models, technologies, and solutions to support the efforts of risk governance and accountability? What role could media play in making disaster risk reduction more inclusive for vulnerable groups? What successful practices, based on your experience, you would highlight as references?
Thank you. These are 3 questions, I guess.
Yes.
And anyway, I'll be very brief. New technologies allow to reach everyone, to walk the last mile, which is very important, especially in disaster situations. This gives possibilities to reach communities that were unreachable before, and will support actually the approach of decentralization that Minister Romero mentioned, and which is the right way, because everything is local. It doesn't happen in the capitals, it doesn't happen in provincial towns, it happens at the villages. And new technologies allow to transfer knowledge, how to deal with these situations, how to empower people, allows for development of community radio, which is a very powerful way to educate people about the environment, the vulnerability of their situation, what to do, how to change their crops, and everything that comes with climate change to be conquered. What role could media play in making disaster risk reduction more inclusive for vulnerable groups? By not leaving anyone behind, media has this pledge not to leave anyone behind, because now technology allows us to reach persons with disability, which have visual or hearing disability, and there are so many new technologies to reach them, to target them. Apart from that, it allows to make programming for vulnerable groups like migrants, like climate change migrants, although it's not recognized in the United Nations as a category. In Bangladesh, there are at least 2 million climate change migrants, and there are going to be more in Pacific Islands. This is something that is going to be very important to target different vulnerable groups with knowledge, education, solutions, best practices for their situation. And finally, what successful practices based would you highlight as reference? My organization, Asia Pacific Broadcasting Union, is having a campaign to develop environmental units in our members. It's hard to believe that in Maldives they don't have environmental correspondent, they don't have specialized programs about climate change, rising sea levels, and it's our aim to do that, and we managed to help to establish in Thailand. Thai PBS, the public service broadcaster, started one program which was just half an hour, once a week, dealing with all kinds of environmental issues with a very interesting approach, because they trained citizens reporters in many different corners of the countries that are capable, able to recognize what to report, how to report it. So there was total involvement of grassroots communities in this program, and it became so popular, it started to, they expanded it to 1 hour, and now they're doing it twice a week, which is a great thing to give the voice of the people. And that was a practice that I think should be replicated in many other places. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for all the participants. Now we have almost taken the time, and I would like to invite the participants, if you have one question or two questions. One. Yes, one question. Yes, that lady. Yes, you.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Nilce Esquivel y soy parte del grupo principal de las Naciones Unidas para la Infancia y la Juventud. Y mi pregunta es para el señor Carlos Márquez. Quisiera saber acerca de la región de Mocoa, que tuvo mucha afectación hace un mes con el desbordamiento de 3 ríos y que pues sí fue una gran tragedia. Entonces quisiera saber, yo sé que es muy corto el tiempo porque pasó un mes, pero si se están aplicando, ¿tiene usted algunas acciones que esté tomando en cuenta para tomar después de esta tragedia, y si está tomando en cuenta el marco Sendai dentro de esas acciones que piensa realizar?
Sí, el tema de la emergencia, Mocoa es un departamento, es la capital de un departamento en la zona selvática de Colombia. El 31 de marzo y 1 de abril se vivió una emergencia por causa de una avenida torrencial. Eso generó 2 temas de análisis importantes. Primero, la vulnerabilidad de algunas zonas del país frente a esos amenazas de origen de la naturaleza. Segundo, también la capacidad de respuesta del país para atender un evento de esa magnitud. En el primer lugar, se están tomando unas medidas importantes y hoy ya el Ministerio de Ambiente y la Corporación Autónoma han hecho un estudio de la cuenca, porque fue importante actualizarla, y también se está generando el tema de la actualización del esquema de ordenamiento territorial. Aún se está evaluando si las causas son de origen de la naturaleza, porque en Mocoa, para todos los asistentes, fue una situación donde dejó 332 muertos hasta hoy, 71 personas desaparecidas. Mocoa fue afectado en una proporción muy alta del municipio, más o menos el 25 al 30% del municipio como tal. La segunda línea de respuesta o de evaluación es la capacidad del país. Efectivamente, en menos de 48 horas se restableció todo el esquema vital. En una semana se hizo la conectividad importante que se necesitaba para esa localidad, que fue afectada en su totalidad la parte energética, la parte de acueducto y otras conectividades, y en un mes, en el primer mes, ya el proceso de estabilización estaba dado, o sea, la respuesta desde el orden operativo se dio. Mocoa también es en estos momentos parte de la aplicación del plan de acción específico. Se espera que en menos de 2 años ya la recuperación y la reconstrucción esté dada con los recursos que se han generado desde el Fondo Nacional de Gestión de Riesgo y, por supuesto, con cooperación internacional. Allí se están juntando varios escenarios claves: la aplicación de la norma, la planificación y también algo que está sirviendo de un caso de estudio. La vulnerabilidad muchas veces es creada por la mano del hombre. Ese es un sector que requería de un manejo de cuenca, de cuidados, pero está en investigación, pero también la ubicación de las comunidades en zonas de alto riesgo. Y bajo ese escenario, cuando se presentan temas atípicos, como el que se presentó, porque llovió, en una noche llovió por encima del promedio que podía llover en un mes, y eso es lo que causó gran parte de esa proporción. Más de 110 milímetros de agua cayeron por segundo, y fue lo que afectó esa situación, pero hace parte de ese plan y es una declaratoria de país que se ha tenido en ese momento. Yo creo que con eso trato de responderle su pregunta.
Thank you very much. Since we are running, we ran out of time, I will try to make a very brief summary. I would like to thank all the panelists for your invaluable inputs, and it is impossible to summarize in such a short time. Few lessons few things that I would like to focus is, I think the lesson for the future period that other countries could use is good practices shared from the national examples. The demonstrated importance of political willingness in the implementation of Sendai Framework that served as an enabler for the creation of national level policies and legislations in a inclusive manner. Also, the importance of coordination between institutions and the shift that occurred and is occurring from response and to preparedness, but as demonstrated, that needs to be followed up with increased finances towards preparedness. And finally, something that was mentioned in all of the speeches was the coherence between Sendai Framework and a message that disaster resilience is not a standalone issue. And if we are to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, disaster resilience is a key component in it. And the lesson, as said by Professor Amatarulga, is that coherence must be operationalized at the national level. We also heard about a lot of challenges, but I wouldn't be repetitive, and since we're running out of time, I would thank one more time all the panelists, respected co-chair, and all the participants, and thank you for coming to the session.
Thank you very much. We now conclude these sessions, and I must thank my co-chair, who has done a very fine job, and also the panelists. They have put forward all the thoughts that we need to know, and I hope that this will be a success in the future. Thank you very much.